Welcome back. In previous lessons, we learned how we could get access to various components here. We want to learn how we can execute this specific task when we access a particular component. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and do that in Andrew in the studio. I'm going to start a new studio project just like always. I'm going to call this one buttons up and I'm going to keep all the settings as it used to be before. Version 27 caught in the reverse of my domain and I'm going to save it somewhere. Finish and was under the studio opens up. I'm going to head to my resources layout and in here you can actually press the layout activity and go there. Or I could actually show you a little shortcut as well. And the shortcut is you can actually go to your main activity, which is the file that usually opens up when you go to your under the studio. You can hold the control button or the command button if you're using a Mac machine like I'm doing, and then click on the name activity main and it's going to take you directly to your activity main if you want to. So two ways of doing it. Either you tap on the activity on this colon or you go to your main activity and you tap on that. Right. So here I'm going to go ahead and say I want to have a few new layouts. One of them is going to be it takes you just like always we put the text view up there so we can see what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and change the text size and I'm going to make it a lot larger, 32 USPI. I'm going to go ahead and align it to the center so it becomes a little bit easier to see. And then I'm going to add a button and this one then I'm going to put it in here somewhere like that. And then my brother actually says, have to talk to like in the for instance, or just like you said. It's not going to really do anything right now, but it's going to show us that so we get a sense of what it would be, the purpose of it. Now, you probably need to set up some of your constraints, at least. So I'm going to set that one and I'm going to set this one. So at least for these two. And then the next thing you do is you want to learn two different methods in which we can actually access a button. One of them is using something called onclick. The other one is using something called set onclicklistener. So I'm going to show you both of these because depending on the situation, they both become quite important and quite useful. So the first one is that I'm going to go ahead and say the name of my text is actually my text view. Just like the last time on the name of my button is going to be my button. So here, my button. Alright. So we have these two taken care of. Then I'm going to head back to my main activity, .cotonying, and file all the main programming files that we have in here. I'm going to tap on that. And in here again, inside the body of my uncreate, I want to write some code. What do I want to write? I want to say my then and just like the last time I'm going to autocomplete and once I have my button auto-completed, I'm going to go ahead and say, sit onclicklistener and I'm going to use the second method in here and we will see in the future what are these different, what we call overlords or flavors. Basically, I'm going to use the second overload, which is essentially set on this and then an open markets and then here we can do whatever we want to be doing in here. Don't worry about how the code is structured. Again, these are things that we'll get back to them in the future. For now, it is important that we just learn how we use them for the time being. Now, before I write something in the body of his, let's remember something we did in the previous lesson. In the previous system, we said my text view that text became tello, for instance. Now, all I want to do is this. I want to say this part actually happens inside here. So whenever my burden is click on you do this, you run this function, whatever is inside here, only when the button has been tapped on. And let's see how that's going to work for us. So now I have these two. I have a button that says, like in and I have a text and if I type on the line, it actually becomes hetal, simply because our code in here, it says onclicklistener changed that. Remember, all of that is inside the body of the uncreate. Now, I want to show you another way, which is doing pretty much the same thing. But that thing is not going to be inside the uncreate. And this is a different method of doing things with the buttons. So the other method is this. Let's go ahead and add a new button in here. I'm going to go ahead and add a third object on the second button. I'm going to put this one in here. I'm going to call this one, let's call it, let's say it says you. By then and then for the I'm going to set the constraint and therefore the idea of it. I'm going to call it new button and that's it, new button. And here I'm going to go ahead to my main activity and add a new function. Let's see how we add these type of functions. I'm going to come outside the uncreate sonatine side there. I'm actually going to come outside. But obviously it's still within our main activity class. I'm going to say fun and in the function I'm going to say new button function. And then within the synthesis, I'm going to say in the column and it's after type view and I have to let it autocomplete because it needs to import some stuff. If I just type it like this is going to give me an error saying I don't know what that is. So again, I'm going to complete his enter and then I'm going to say this is the body of it. So what does this mean? Just think hard here. We had the function uncreate and it had some arguments inside it. Now I have a function of my own called the new Python function, and it has an argument of the type of view it must have with that. And then within the body of it, we can do whatever we want to do. For instance, my text, that view that the text becomes this is. Alright. So now we have created a new function, just like the uncreate function. But the uncreate function, it happens automatically when the application loads vendors this function. Run. And if you're not familiar with what is a function and what is a class, don't worry at all. We going to get 2 lessons that we talk about object-oriented programming and classes and functions. And methods and all of these things are going to be super clear by then. For now, we just want to learn how we use it, some of this basic stuff so we can actually build a little foundation for our future lessons. So here I'm going to say I have this function. I don't know how am I going to call it. Here is how I'm going to copy its name. I'm going to go to my activity main. I'm going to select the button that I want to call and I'm going to search for something called unclick. And then I'm going to say, until they do that, I automatically shows me that's the only one that is actually available. So I'm going to say on new button function is the function we're going to get called every time this guy has been clicked on. And if you go ahead and we run this application now, let's see what we get the next time that it actually loads up here. I have the 2 buttons. One of them turns that into a hello. The other one turns it into a this is a cartooning. And that's exactly what we expect to see. So basically 2 different ways of connecting our buttons to our functions. One of them is using a set on onclicklistener and the other one is using a unclick function, using a function that has an argument of the type view. This is a key part of it. It must be there. What is a view? We will see in a few lessons and we get a better sense of it just so that you get an overall understanding of it. The view is the very basic object that you can see in your activity in here. So any of these guys, it is basically a child of the view. This is a child of the view, which also allows for a text. This is a child of the view that allows for the text and also allows for interactivity, so on and so forth. But they will come to this in the future. For now, what matters is basically these 3 lines of code and these 4 lines of code. So we learned 2 different ways of interacting with our buttons. Once you're good with that, let's move on to our next lesson.